y'all, what's up? I hope you are well. My name is Patricia, your born and raised small town girl, here to remind you that the unthinkable can happen anywhere. Welcome back, guys, and if you're here for the first time, welcome. I'm so glad you are here. Today, we are diving into part 4 of our Route 29 series about young women who have disappeared in small town areas near Route 29 in Virginia. Last week, we covered the beginning of Morgan Harrington's case and learned about RG. This week, we're talking about the case that finally connected everything together, the case that led investigators to the truth about Morgan, about RG, and about the man responsible. So let's jump right in. Hannah Elizabeth Graham was born February 25th, 1996, to her parents John and Susan Graham in the UK. When Hannah was 5, her parents, and her brother James moved to Fairfax, Virginia, where she grew up. From the beginning, Hannah stood out as a straight-A student who loved both academics and athletics. She played softball in high school and became captain in her senior year. Hannah's high school softball coach remembered her as, quote, witty, polite, extremely intelligent with a very dry British sense of humor, end quote. Music was also a huge part of Hannah's life. She played alto sax and piano in high school. Her dad described her as sparkly, dynamic, and lively, saying she brought so much to their lives. Friends remembered her as optimistic, bright, and full of energy. They said she was gorgeous, sweet, really funny, with a big heart and a natural ability to make anybody feel included. She loved Elvis and had a weakness for Starburst candies. She also enjoyed cooking for her friends, and they said she was an amazing cook. She was empathetic and valued helping others. She volunteered with Habitat for Humanity and was known for giving everyone the time of day no matter their background. In 2014, Hannah was thriving. She had just spent the summer abroad in France and was in the beginning of her second year at the University of Virginia, where she was on the ski team and was planning to apply for a special program in global health. She was responsible. She was dependable. That's why when she didn't show up for a school event she was supposed to be at Saturday, September 13th, 2014, her roommate knew immediately something was wrong. Right away, she called John and Susan Graham, frantically explaining that Hannah didn't come home that Friday night and then didn't show up for the school event. She told them that Friday night she, Hannah, and some of their friends had gone out to eat at a local restaurant called Fig, and that they then went to some house parties at Camden Hall, which is like a student housing complex. This is the same complex where Morgan Harrington's Pantera shirt was found. At around 11:50 p.m., Hannah told her friend she wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home. A friend offered to walk with her, but Hannah told them to stay and enjoy the party, that she would get herself home. The complex was in an area that was right near downtown Charlottesville, and not a long walk to where Hannah lived for the semester with her roommate. I'm assuming her friend felt she could make it, but I'm not sure that I would have let my friend walk alone, especially if she was as intoxicated as witnesses later say she was. I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone and say anyone is to blame besides the person who hurt Hannah. I'm just saying that I probably would have walked with her. When it was clear that Hannah couldn't be found, John and Susan reported their daughter missing to Charlottesville police. In a statement, Hannah's family said, quote, those of us who know and love Hannah know that she would not disappear without contacting family or friends. She is highly responsible and organized, end quote. Investigators got to work quickly. They started pulling security footage from the downtown mall area, trying to see if they showed where Hannah was and if they could develop a timeline. The downtown mall isn't what you would envision when you think about a mall. It's an area with several small businesses that all have entrances from the outside. They had to go to each business to see if they had cameras at their entrances and if they could review them to see if they could see Hannah. The first place Hannah is spotted on footage is McGrady's Pub at 12:45 a.m. When interviewed, the bouncer told police that Hannah walked past, doubled back, and walked past again. He said she definitely looked intoxicated, so he asked her if she was all right and if she needed help. She told him she was okay and didn't need any help. At 1:06 a.m., another camera captured a man duck into a doorway, clearly waiting for Hannah to pass. When she passed, he tried to approach her, but when he did, another man appeared. The second man walked past Hannah, turned around, walked straight up to her, and put his arm around her. The first male later told police that he thought the guy knew Hannah because of how he acted toward her. The police got a weird vibe from this guy, though. He didn't seem to have any type of reason to be alone on the downtown mall so late. I honestly think he was out there hunting for a victim, just like the second man. As we will learn, at that moment, Hannah was possibly being targeted by two different predators. The second guy was just faster. Because think about it, if the first guy was really worried about a drunk girl, why was he hiding in the doorway waiting for her to pass? Why not just approach her and ask her if she's okay? Like, why do you need to hide? That leads me to question, were the two of them working together? It kind of seems to me like they were, considering when he described the second guy to police, he described him as a black man in his late 20s, early 30s, about 5'11", who had a close-shaved head and a goatee, who was wearing black jeans and a white t-shirt. But that is not at all how he appeared on the video, not even close. In the video footage, you could tell that the man had dreads and was wearing white knee-length shorts with a white t-shirt. Also, he was much taller, definitely over 6 foot tall. I find this so strange. There's no way to mistake dreads and close-shaved head. Why would he completely lie about the description of the second man? We will talk more about this in my overview episode at the end of this series because I want to dig into it, but it'll take up more time in this. I'll just go over how I feel about it in the overview episode. An officer who was reviewing the footage was able to identify the second man as a guy he went to school with named Jesse Matthew. Now that police knew the second man was Jesse Matthew, they returned to the footage to see where Jesse and Hannah went after he put his arm around her. The footage showed them entering a bar called Tempo. Witnesses said they had drinks together. The staff that was interviewed said she seemed happy and upbeat, but Jesse not so much. Receipts showed that Matthew paid for 2 beers. Hannah was only 18, so I'm not sure if the staff was aware one of those drinks was for a minor. At 1:18 a.m., the two were spotted leaving Tempo, walking arm in arm. Around this time, witnesses said they saw Hannah refuse to get into Jesse's car, a burnt orange Chrysler. The witness said they heard her shout that she wasn't going to get in the car with him and asked him if his car was stolen. The witness that saw that kept walking to their car and said once they drove back past a few moments later, Jesse, Hannah, and the car was gone. At 1:20 a.m., Hannah sent a garbled text to her friends that said, "I got stuck down though." Most believe she meant to type downtown. That was the last anyone heard from Hannah Graham. Police had a name for the last person Hannah was seen with, and it had somewhat of a timeline. It was time to talk to him. They went to Jesse's apartment and questioned him. He claimed to not know Hannah and that he couldn't remember what all he did that Friday night. He did allow police to come in and do a cursory search to see if Hannah was in his apartment. The detectives informed him that they had a search warrant for his car and asked him if Hannah had been in his car at all. He claimed she hadn't and asked him if he could get his passport out of the glove box in his car before they took it. But of course they wouldn't let him. Like, duh, why would they let you have your passport? That's just so suspicious. That would mean, like, what if he tried to run? But he does. Wait, we'll talk about it. During this search, police brought in a K9 unit that detected Hannah's DNA on the passenger side of the door, as well as a trash can outside and the entryway to Matthew's apartment. The K9 handler said this gives the impression that she was carried in and didn't walk in on her own volition. Evidence was starting to point at Jesse Matthews, so the police started interviewing friends, family, and co-workers to build a picture of who he is. Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. was born December 15, 1981 in Charlottesville, Virginia, to a large family. He was bullied in school because he was poor, had a stutter, and also had a severe learning disability. His father was absentee, an alcoholic, and a cheater. And when his father would go cheat on Matthew's mother, he would bring Jesse with him to his mistress's houses. It was said he treated his mistresses way better than he treated Jesse's mom, which gave Jesse the impression that only some women deserved to be treated well. His father had been arrested several times for public intoxication and public indecency. This all led to his parents divorcing when Jesse was 16. He used sports as an outlet. He was a 40-0 state wrestling champion in grade school, and in 1999 he was Charlottesville's Athlete of the Year. At Monticello High School, he was co-captain of the football team. His athleticism ended up getting him a full-ride scholarship to Liberty University. Matthew did have a history of violent behavior. Allegedly, he sexually assaulted a 15-year-old at Liberty University in 2000 at a football camp prior to being enrolled. He claimed it was consensual, but she was 15, so there is no damn consensual at that age. The young girl accused him of carrying her in the bathroom and choking her. She was able to get away, thank goodness, and went straight to campus police to report it. Instead of handling her with respect and listening to her story, these asshats put her in a car with Jesse Matthew. She begged them to take her to the hospital, but campus police talked her into instead allowing a female debate coach to take pictures of her nude for evidence. Like, what the fuck is that? This pisses me off. She was a minor and this is how she was treated. Why weren't her parents contacted immediately? They should have been notified as soon as she reported it, but they didn't do that. Rather, they interrogated her for hours with no food and no water. The interrogation consisted of male campus officers wanting her to withdraw her claims and calling her a liar. They told her going forward with the allegation would only damage her reputation and ruin Jesse Matthews' life. This is absolute bullshit. So many people would have been saved from a lot of hurt had they listened and actually handled this situation correctly. Even though they were treating her this way, she pushed on, but eventually was told by a Commonwealth attorney that the charges were dropped due to lack of physical proof. The same physical proof that the campus officers made her wash off of her hands and wouldn't take her to the hospital to provide. This isn't the first time things like this have been ignored at Liberty University. If you haven't already, you should listen to the podcast called Liberty Lost. It will show you how something so heinous could just be swept under the rug like this. In spite of this accusation, Jesse was allowed to attend Liberty on his scholarship to play football. But then another woman told campus police that Matthew raped her at Liberty University in October of 2002. A Liberty spokeswoman would not say whether Matthew was expelled after this incident, but did say he left the Lynchburg campus within months after the only reported assault that year on October 17th. By January 2003, Jesse was enrolled at Christopher Newport University and set to play football on their team. But then once again, on September 7, 2003, he was accused of sexual assault on that campus. But again, no criminal charges were filed. Matthew ended up leaving CNU a month later. He attended CNU from January 2003 to October 2003. He played on the football team a little time, August 2003 to September 12, 2003. A CNU spokeswoman said, quote, "Students don't usually leave in the second month of the semester or leave the football team within a month. However, federal student privacy laws limit the information we can provide. The universe is fully cooperating with law enforcement agencies," end quote. Both Liberty and CNU said they did internal investigations but would not disclose the outcome of those investigations, citing privacy laws. The law then was to get students' disciplinary record, a school would have to ask for it during the transfer process or it wouldn't be provided. CNU claims Liberty didn't disclose info about the accusations when Jesse was transferring to play football. In order for him to transfer, they required signed statements from the previous athletic department that the student was in good standings both academically and with no disciplinary issue. You would think being accused of sexual assault more than once would be a disciplinary issue, but I guess Liberty didn't see it that way. Major fucking eye roll. Ugh. In 2009, Matthew was accused of assault and attempted grand larceny, but the charges were dropped. In 2010, he was convicted of criminal trespassing. In 2012, he was charged with possession of stolen property, but those charges were dropped. It seems most of the time he would get caught, but would never get consequences. Jesse had multiple romantic relationships. It was said he was warm and gentle with them. A childhood friend said, quote, "LJ is one of the most loving, helpful people you'd ever want to come in contact with, and he always has been," end quote. At pep rallies before games, Matthew was said to be lively and the center of attention. Friends and coworkers described him as a kind, warm-hearted man who enjoyed spending time with friends and family. One of his teammates from Liberty University described him as goofy, kind of immature, a stellar athlete, but not the brightest guy in the book. At the time of Hannah's disappearance, Jesse coached football at a Covenant school and was employed as a patient care technician in the operating room at UVA. A coworker at UVA told investigators his demeanor changed the week after Hannah's disappearance, saying he became reserved and began eating lunch by himself, which was not normal for him. On Saturday, September 20th, Matthew called the police station and agreed to come in for interrogation. However, when he showed up, he refused to talk and asked for a lawyer. When he left the station, FBI agents began following him in hopes he would lead them to Hannah. They tried to keep up with him, but he was driving erratically. It became dangerous for the public, so they backed off. They did witness him breaking several traffic laws, though. and that gave investigators what they needed to issue 2 reckless driving arrest warrants. They released a wanted notice to the public. Once Matthew learned this news, though, he took all the money out of his bank, borrowed his sister's car, and ran. Hannah's family was reeling during all of this. They didn't know what to do. They were solely releasing statements through police at first, saying, quote, "Hannah is beyond precious to us, and we are truly devastated by her disappearance. We will not rest until we find her and she comes home," end quote. They didn't make their first public appearance until September 21st at a press conference where they begged for Hannah's safe return. Sue Graham said, quote, "Somebody listening to me today either knows where Hannah is or knows someone who has that information. We appeal to you to come forward and tell us where Hannah can be found. Please, please, please help end this nightmare for all of us. Please help us bring Hannah home," end quote. Chief Timothy Longo, he was also involved in Morgan's case, spoke at this press conference addressing how people were focusing on Hannah being intoxicated instead of the fact that a young woman was missing. He said, quote, "Folks have gone very quickly to that issue and have attacked the character of this young lady, and I think unfairly. I find it unfortunate that people are latching onto that and speaking poorly of a young lady's character, an individual they don't even know," end quote. On September 22nd, investigators returned to Jesse's apartment with a full search warrant this time. They left with several items that Charlottesville Police Captain Gary Pleasant said they expected to find. That kind of rubs me the wrong way, because what could you expect to find that you didn't find the first time? Is it because the first time was just a quick cursory type of search? I don't know. I just find it weird to expect to find evidence. How could you know you would find anything, let alone usable evidence? Maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe, which you guys will learn that I tend to do, but I will also discuss this more in the last episode of the series where I go over all of everything that I think about the whole series that we've done. On September 23rd, Matthew was officially charged with abduction and attempt to defile. This made the search for him intensify. Information about him and him being wanted was blasted everywhere on national news outlets. Thankfully, it was, because on September 24th, a woman named Karen Monk saw Matthew on the beach in Gilchrist, Texas. She noticed he looked like the man on TV that the police were looking for. She called Crime Stoppers several times and said she wasn't taken seriously. He drove away when he noticed her, but she stayed because he had set up a tent. So she was going to wait for him to return, and when he did return, she called the Galveston sheriff. The sheriff did take her seriously and sent out officers immediately, who quickly figured out that it was Jesse Matthew. They arrested him on the spot to have him extradited back to Virginia. It was thought maybe he was headed for Mexico. Could you imagine if he would have got to Mexico? These families would have never had answers, and many women there would have become potential victims. Now they had Matthew in custody, but still had no answers on where Hannah was. So on the weekend of October 4th, 110 officers from different localities in Virginia, as well as a trained rescue dog team, came to Albemarle County to help search for Hannah. Police Chief Longo said that they would be searching every square inch of Albemarle County and that they were going to find Hannah Graham. The officers said they hadn't given up hope that Hannah could be found alive and returned home. First Sergeant Mike Berry said, quote, "This is a rescue effort. We're here to find Hannah and bring Hannah home," end quote. He referred to how many people thought Elizabeth Smart was probably dead and said, "There's always a possibility." At the same time, results from the investigation were starting to come back. Officers knew they had the man who knew what happened to Hannah, but they needed the evidence to back it up. Shorts that were found in Matthew's apartment came back as having Hannah and his DNA on them. Her DNA was also found on the handle of his car. The investigators used cigarette butts found in the car that Matthew had tried to escape in to retrieve his DNA. When that DNA was run through CODIS, it matched immediately to RG and Morgan Harrington. The DNA from the cigarette matched the DNA found under RG's fingernails and the unknown male DNA found on Morgan's Pantera shirt. Authorities confirmed that DNA link on September 29, 2014. Not only that, though, after testing, it was found that the dog hair that was found on Morgan matched the genetic profile of Jesse's dog, Popcorn. Matthew was indicted in the case of RG's sexual assault on October 10, 2014. A bench warrant was issued on October 24th to have him brought to Fairfax, Virginia to face trial. He was charged with attempted capital murder, sexual penetration with an object, and abduction with intent to defile. Matthew's public defender, Bob Frank, filed a motion to suppress RG's pretrial identification as well as her in-person identification of Matthew in court. He argued that the victim is likely aware of Matthew's high-profile arrest in Hannah's case, which could deem any identification unreliable. The judge denied denied the motion to suppress identification because the victim returned to her home country of India not long after the attack, so she wasn't in America when all of this was happening. However, he did say defense could bring it up in trial for the jury. RG testified June 4, 2015, and identified Matthew in court. With that, Matthew took an Alford plea after 3 days of testimony. With this plea, he was admitting that the prosecutor had enough evidence to convict him without directly admitting to the crime. Before sentencing, Matthew's mom, Deborah Carr, wrote a letter to the judge begging for mercy for her son. Quote, "Jesse has always shown respect to everyone around him regardless of if he knew you or not," end quote. Matthew's ex-girlfriend, who dated him from 2003 to 2005, also wrote a letter to the judge ahead of sentencing saying that he had divulged to her when they were together that he was sexually assaulted when his father would take him to his mistress's homes. She said that he told her he was assaulted by at least 3 different people. One of those people assaulted him many times and made him keep it a secret. Jesse did later confirm in an interview that this was true but wouldn't speak more about it. The girlfriend wrote to the judge, quote, "I have no doubt that this repeated sexual trauma during his developmental years played a key role in the allegations against him today," end quote. Commonwealth Attorney Ray Morrow questioned the truth of the claim that Matthew was sexually assaulted, saying, quote, "If this man was ever raped, then of all people it is he who should be loath to rape someone else," end quote. He called Matthew a modern-day Jekyll and Hyde who projected an image of a gentle giant to friends and family while hiding his life as a violent sexual predator. He seeks mercy, but is himself merciless. He seeks empathy, but he is heartless. Jesse's public defender told the judge during sentencing, "He's a gentle giant, and we asked the court to look at the total man, not just the monster portrayed by the Commonwealth and the media." The judge disagreed and sentenced Matthew to 3 consecutive life sentences on October 2, 2015, 1 for each charge. When handing down his sentence, Judge Schell called the assault a, quote, "brutal and vicious attack." On September 15, 2015, Matthew was formally charged with first-degree murder and abduction with the intent to defile for Morgan. The trial date was set for October 24, 2016. Information about Matthew during the time of Morgan's disappearance started coming out. On the night of Morgan's disappearance, Matthew was a taxi cab driver in Charlottesville. In the days leading up to Morgan's disappearance, he had instances where he was asking young women for sexual favors instead of cash for their cab fee. A young woman testified that the night before Morgan's abduction, she was passenger in his cab and that he asked for sexual favors instead of money for her cab ride. 4 different women came forward and said they rode in Matthew's cab that night of the Metallica concert. One of those women said she got out of Matthew's cab and saw Morgan on the Copley Bridge looking for a ride. This is why in the first one that I spoke about the taxi cab, that it makes me wonder if she was trying to hail a taxi and unfortunately the taxi driver happened to be Jesse Matthew. Dispatchers at the cab company testified that he was hard to reach for calls that night. It was also found that Jesse had been on his phone all day, but at 9:30 p.m., the night of the Metallica concert, it went dark with no activity for 90 minutes. With all this evidence, Matthew's defense attorney offered a deal of 25 years in prison if Jesse admitted to killing Morgan and Hannah, as well as lead police to the remains of Hannah. The Harringtons and Grahams had become close through the process, and they declined this offer. Not long after the offer, Hannah's remains were found on October 18, 2014. Her remains were found in a shallow grave on an abandoned property in a densely wooded ravine behind a vacant home, just 5 miles from where Morgan's remains were found. Jesse was familiar with this area because he had grown up a few miles down the road. The autopsy determined Hannah's manner of death was homicidal violence of undetermined nature. Hannah had 2 nasal fractures occurring at or after the time of death, which led them to believe the cause of death was more than likely suffocation. This discovery led to Matthew being indicted on first-degree murder charges for Hannah on February 10, 2015. Those charges were upgraded to capital murder on May 5, 2015. This upgrade carried the possibility of the death penalty. Commonwealth Attorney Denise Lunsford said the prosecutors didn't intend for Harrington's case and Graham's case to be combined, and that she did intend to seek the death penalty in Hannah's case. Because Matthew was charged with capital murder, the presiding judge, Cheryl Higgins, appointed Douglas Ramseor from the Capital Defender's Office and Charlottesville attorney Michael Hemingway to represent Jesse. She declined to allow James Comblos, who had been representing Jesse, to stay on because he had no experience in capital murder cases. The new legal defense team told Judge Higgins they were going to seek her removal from the case because she had a daughter who was also a second year at UVA like Hannah was. Judge Higgins said that would not affect her decision making and didn't recuse herself. They filed several motions, one to have his shackles removed during trial, saying jury might view his shackles as first-hand evidence of future dangerousness and uncontrollable behavior, which, if unmanageable in court, may also be unmanageable in prison, leaving death as the proper decision. They also asked to bar any tokens in the courtroom that would show support for any party, witness, or for Graham. And lastly, a motion to assert Matthew's right not to speak with anyone other than his attorneys. All of those motions were denied. On September 26, 2015, Matthew made his first court appearance in the Harrington case. Her parents came face to face with him in court. Dan Harrington said, quote, "I want him to know that we are present, and we have been present for 6 years, and we will be present for the months to come. He needs to know justice is coming," end quote. Jill Harrington wore the bracelet Morgan was wearing the night of the concert to court. She said she wanted Matthew to see her face. Quote, "I wanted him to see for all intents and purposes this is the face of justice for Morgan," end quote. Jill Harrington went on to say, quote, "It has been such a long journey. It has been 6 years, and we have been working diligently to try to find answers in the person we believe killed our beloved daughter, Morgan Dana Harrington," end quote. After another court appearance on September 30th, Jill approached Jesse Matthews' mom. Quote, "I looked his mother in the eyes. I told her I understand this was very difficult on their family as well. I gave her my condolences and I shook her hand. It was the right thing to do. I think she was surprised, but I think she was receptive," end quote. She went on to say, quote, "There were no winners here today. There's losers all around," end quote. After these hearings, the families got together and decided they didn't want to go through a whole death penalty trial. They agreed if Jesse was willing to plead guilty, they would take the death penalty off the table. With the agreement, he would relinquish his rights to appeal and the ability for any type of release, including geriatric release. He would serve his 4 life sentences with no chance of ever getting out. The state put language in the agreement that if Matthew violated this agreement in any way, they can bring the death penalty charges back on the table. John Graham said they were in full support of this plea agreement. Quote, "Our overriding priority was that Matthew will never again be able to inflict this depravity on young women. This agreement meets this objective, which we regard as a public safety imperative," end quote. Matthew accepted the plea agreement. On March 2nd, 2016, he received his 4 life sentences. The families were allowed to give victim impact statements during the sentencing hearing. Dan Harrington said every second of every day for the past 6.5 years that he and his wife had been living in a, quote, "world that has gone gray and flat." Hannah Graham's father said, quote, "His evil depraved this world of great talent, but Hannah's enduring gift to us all is that she enabled this wicked man to be apprehended and convicted. She did change the world, but at a terrible price," end quote. Sue Graham said her daughter was a heroine who helped capture a serial rapist and murderer who had been hiding in plain sight in Charlottesville for years. Jill Harrington said that the conclusion of the trial would allow our family to redirect energy into healing and recovering, both areas that we have neglected during our quest for justice for Morgan. It has been a very long journey to this point. Jesse Matthews showed no emotion during his sentencing. Reverend Louis Carr spoke on behalf of the Matthew family after the trial. Quote, "It is difficult for us to understand how a gentle soul transforms into this type of individual. We want to express to the Harrington family and the Graham family our sorrow over what our family member Jesse Leroy Matthew Jr. chose to do to your daughters. We know there is nothing we can do to erase what Jesse has done, but we pray that you will find it in your hearts to someday forgive our loved one for the act committed against your loved ones," end quote. Matthew chose not to give a statement, but had his attorney, Doug Ramsewer, say on his behalf that he was very sorry for what happened and that he, quote, "loved his family very much." Commonwealth attorney Robert Tracy said about the plea, quote, "It provides the family, community, and Commonwealth with legal finality and clarity in cases that would have been subjected to extended appellate review," end quote. Matthew's mom approached Jill Harrington after he pled guilty and told her that they were very sorry for what had happened. Jill hugged Deborah Carr, said she wanted people to see how she had no hatred for her so they wouldn't have hatred towards her. In the aftermath, the Hannah Graham Graham Award was created. It was awarded to a student selected yearly to travel during the summer to a developing country to assist a nonprofit or government agency in public health. The exact nature and location will change each year. It will also include a $10,000 cash prize. John Graham said, quote, "We hope that through this award, part of Hannah's legacy will be to improve the lives of those living in very challenging circumstances," end quote. The Harringtons fought hard to make sure that this didn't happen again. This is why they spoke in front of Congress trying to change the rules on when DNA is collected upon arrest. Because had Matthew's DNA been collected one of the several times that he was arrested, he would have been found to be responsible for RG's assault and probably would have never had the chance to take the lives of Morgan and Hannah. It is very evident Jesse Matthew is responsible for what happened to RG, Morgan, Hannah, and possibly more young women. But the question remains, did he work alone? We will talk about this more in the final episode of this series, where we bring it all together with my thoughts on whether I think this is all connected or just random coincidences. I want to thank you all so much for listening. Please subscribe so you will be notified when new episodes drop. Also, please give your girl a follow on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at This Doesn't Happen Here on IG and Facebook, and at This Doesn't Happen on TikTok. Also, if you could rate and review the podcast wherever you are listening, that would greatly help the podcast out, and I would appreciate it so much. Until next time, remember, pure evil doesn't have city limits, and this does, in fact, happen here.